podcast. Hell yeah, brother. Overload, brother.
Beats by @Smoke M2D6.
Welcome to another pre-draft episode of Seattle Overload. This episode, we're going to be looking at the cornerbacks and the wide receivers in the 2022 class. I'm joined by Griffin Sturgeon and Ty Dane Gonzalez. And lads, how are we doing before we get into this exciting group?
I'm very excited to talk about this. We got a week to go until the draft. A lot of possibilities. John Schneider, today keeping the door open for a possible trade down, possible trade up. The usual. There's going to be a lot of movement, a lot of exciting stuff in about a week. We're actually going to get some answers to some long-awaited questions.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. Doing all right. Excited to talk about it all. Options at 9 here are pretty intriguing, especially, we're talking about corners and receivers this draft. So they got some options at 9. There are some other interesting options further down the draft, though. So,
yes.
And
as it pertains to the cornerback position in particular, the highest they've picked a corner is Shaquille Griffin in the 3rd round. Now, I think they'd probably say, if there's the right guy, and maybe there is the right guy in this draft, would take them a bit higher. But generally speaking, we can expect them not to address it too highly. I mean, their decision to let DJ Reed walk in the offseason as well. There's a certain confidence, I think. May that be misplaced? May that not be misplaced? But based on the results of 2021 season, where they were able to basically get a revolving door at cornerback and still survive on defense, especially in the cornerback area, like their problems weren't really a direct result of the cornerback area, although there may have been some impact from the defenses they're running, but I digress. So before we get into these cornerbacks, it's important, I think, for the listeners, the viewers on YouTube, to outline what they ask of their corners and how that may change, how it may not change. Now, historically, they ran press cover 1 as a kind of change up and a bit of off cover 1, right, depending on the formation and the split. But then they also ran cover 3, right? And cover 3, I think there's perhaps a misconception. You can play press zone out of cover 3, and because they're playing press zone on the outside, the offense to them, it looked like cover 1, right? And you're basically playing to a single receiver. That could be a receiver and a tight end, or it could just be a lone receiver. Depends on the receiver splits. But you're just playing press man to man. But if that guy runs underneath, then you release him, and then you look for work in your zone. Then the other thing they asked of their corners was if they had a slot, then you have to obviously play more zone-like principles, kind of play midpoint, deep third zone technique. Now, obviously, Legion of Boom days are over. You've lost Richard Sherman, who was one of the best press corners we've seen, and a superb midpointer, really underrated in off coverage. Now, as I said, they moved to a bit more middle field open stuff, or that's always been in their background, in Pete Carroll's background, I should say. Griffin, do you think they kind of continue with, Kyle Scott coming in, the coaching staff changes? Do they continue this leaning into slightly different stuff? Or do they try to get stickier, play more middle field closed? As we've spoke about, the Fangio tree, Fangio himself ran more cover 1, right, last year. So, do they try and get stickier and play more press, middle field closed stuff like I spoke about and explained just now?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to need their DBs to do all of it, their corners to do all of it, right? So they're going to be playing more man coverage, but that's just within their one high split, right? I mean, they might do some man match quarters, but that's kind of, at least on the perimeter, it's kind of the same thing versus zone in terms of technique and stuff. Like you're talking about, like even cover 3 on the perimeter. I mean, there are a lot of man principles there. I think how you try to roster it is, I think the more sticky man coverage or man technique principles, those are more rare, more scarce. So I think you prioritize that skill set and then just think that you can coach them on the zone principles. So if they get a really good corner, that corner is going to find themselves playing a cloud quite often. But and like that's probably the least stressful thing you can ask a cornerback to do. You know, you think half quarter cover 6, right? The way they play cover 6. So yeah, they're going to be doing that, but they're also just as easily the next snap going to be playing cover 1, have to mark a guy all the way across the field. So I don't know. I think they're going to have to just find, you know, guys that can cover, you know, regardless. So
yeah, because I think what last year showed was, and well, the last few years really, they're trying to lean into being more multiple in their coverages, as you just spoke about, right? And it's that balancing act, and offenses are so nuts at the moment, and we don't really expect the pass rush. I mean, whatever they do in the draft, the pass rush isn't going to be like top 5 in the league, which can help cover up certain things in terms of you know, and help you play more middle field closed coverage where you're on an island on the perimeter, right? The other thing as well is reflected in their wish to be more multiple, but perhaps more flexible. They have moved to more of a smaller cornerback mold. The selection of Trey Brown out of Oklahoma. You know, I spent ages looking at these 32-inch arm long guys. I'd also spent ages wondering why Demarius Randall switched from safety to cornerback, despite having way shorter arms and outside cornerback, not nickel. And it turned out, they're going for a smaller cornerback mold. And Pete Carroll, as we spoke about on the show as well, as I wrote about, he referenced his time when he had Donnie LeGrand and someone whose name I can't remember. Perhaps Williams was the surname. But essentially, he had a smaller guy way back in the day, and he had a longer-armed guy. And they were able to play with both, and he's come full 180 on it. I think the Witherspoon experience with Akello Witherspoon, that proves insightful in the techniques they're looking for and the style, in the sense that if you've got those long arms and you're that big dude, you better be standing in there, jamming at the line, playing 2-to-1 to number the arms, not relying on your feet, but using your arms, putting your length to use. However, Carroll's always coached a mirror step technique as well as a step kick press. They're actually more similar than you think. But he's always been happy to coach his mirror step style, which is more relying on both times the feet are important, but in simple terms, it is more reliant on the feet. And that he seems to have welcomed with the smaller corner mold, although he still wants the 2-to-1 to number the arms going on if possible, right? But there's more flexibility. And then in terms of the positioning on the field, Sherman always played on the left side of the field. It took me a while when I was starting to learn football to understand why that would be. Well, just to explain it, right-handed quarterback, he's going to open to his right side, which is where the left side of the defense. So if you've got that big dude, right, it's kind of like the college version of a boundary corner, as in boundary side, short side of the field. If you've got that big dude taking away disrupting the timing of where most of the first read is going to be, then you can stick, if we're talking Seattle now, with the smaller, longer guy, you can stick the smaller guy like they did with DJ Reed, although he did prefer the right side. You can stick the smaller guy in an area where he has generally speaking, he has a bit more time. He can rely on his feet to do some stuff, and his hands, he can play off a bit more perhaps, you know, having that immediate press to take away the immediate, hips are open to the right side of the field go. It's not as big a deal on the other side of the field. So, yeah. So, Griff, anything to add, or should we talk the top two guys in this class?
Well, so real quick before we get into the actual prospects, given that we just talked about style and everything, how do we view Seattle's need at corner, given the guys on the roster already?
Very high. But then very weird, weirdly, I said heading into last draft, they have to take a corner. Why haven't they done anything in free agency? What are we doing here? And they did, right? They took Trey Brown. COVID sort of made me lose a year, and they did sign Witherspoon. But I still was a bit alarmed that Shaquille Griffin was allowed to walk. Well, not allowed to walk. They clearly weren't interested in paying him, and he obviously had the freedom to choose where he went. But this year's kind of similar deal, though. I actually felt Reed had durability concerns existed. I guess he wasn't. He was kind of that guy who, if you had signed him, you'd be like, yeah, he is going to miss like 2 games, 3 games a year. Like he is that kind of player. He hasn't shown an ability to play it, all 17 games now. But I was a bit more adamant they should have re-signed Reed. Then again, if we're thinking about it in the terms of he's not that left corner, they probably viewed him as a good 2. And then, the cornerback market is always rising. He got more money from the Jets. I imagine Seattle probably made a lower offer than the Jets. And at the end of the day, especially with Russell Wilson gone, good for him to go. He'd earned that contract. Like he played really good football. But so I think in our minds, we probably think corner is more important than they do. Like if it came down to it, and if there's like a premium edge, say we got Thibodeau falling to 9, or we got Stingley at 9, they're going to take Thibodeau, right? They might even take Jordan Davis. So. Like, because, I mean, you guys might be like, Davis ain't a premium edge. Yeah, you're right. He's not an edge for a start, but they'd bet on that potential and what he can bring to the, the ceiling of D line. Like, they clearly have, I mean, their history shows us this, right?
Yeah. It kind of seems like they are content with what they have, which to me is very concerning because I wouldn't put all my eggs in the basket of Artie Burns and even Sidney Jones, who did look good in the second half of the season, but there's obviously injury concerns. There's a lack of track record overall. I was disappointed that they did not bring Reed back. I thought that was a pretty big mistake, especially with the financial flexibility that they have down the road. I felt like they could have absolutely made that work, especially for the deal that he signed for, because we're talking about a guy that once he got back to the right side, just played a lot better and seemed to really take to what Norton was doing towards the end of the year. Statistically speaking, was playing at a all-pro level, near all-pro level.
But with their additions being disappointing to you, like to me, it always feels like they're kind of just on hedging the cornerback position since paying Sherman. Like it never feels like they've fully addressed it, and then it turns out they've done enough. Well, that can be argued, but anyway,
it's it does feel like they're constantly chasing their tail, like you said, or like kind of alluded to. But I was all for paying DJ Reed, and then he's out the door. But trying to put ourselves in their minds, DJ Reed had the season he had based off of like 6 games in 2020, right? So they're thinking, well, if we can get that out of DJ Reed, and granted pedigree wise, I mean, was he an undrafted free agent or like a 5th, 6th round pick?
5th round pick out of
Kansas State. So he was a 5th round pick, and like not only that, but like they didn't know if he was a nickel at first or an outside corner. So that happened, and Sidney Jones also had a Ty, you mentioned it. He had about 5-6 games of really quality play toward the end of the season. Artie Burns, ironically, the number 6 keeps cropping up. Artie Burns, his last 6 games of the year in Chicago were really good, and that's been the story of his career, being up and down. So you can fashion an argument in support of being optimistic that they could be okay there, but it's really not prudent. It's unwise to have any sort of assurance. Like being open to the idea is one thing, but like just assuming they can go into this draft like, oh, we're good at corner, isn't safe. And then even if you are as optimistic as you can be, they're on 1-year deals. Even Justin Coleman, they're all on 1-year deals. So there's no long-term stability there. The draft is if you don't want to pay corner unless it's Richard Sherman, the draft is the best way to get like long-term options there, because you have 4 years of roster control, if not 5, if you take him the first round, right? So Trey Brown's there. Let Sidney Jones, Artie Burns, certainly there's talent, let them battle it out. But if they really like one of the top 2 guys at 9, we'll talk about those guys. But then additionally, Matty, like you said, if someone like Thibodeau drops, or even if they have a really high eval on Karlaftis, for example, then there still might be some options there at 40. It does start to get a little less exciting, but that's maybe where game theory comes into it, opportunity cost and all that. So,
well, just to wrap up my thought real quick, it's just, banking on 1-year guys, not really having much of a long-term solution, paired with Trey Brown obviously looking, really strong when he played, but coming off of a patella tendon, that's a serious thing. That's, we've seen a couple of Seahawks come off of that and not really look like themselves when they've come back from it. That's a really difficult injury to recover from. And, and it's scary because you're just now coming off of a year where you had to pretty much rebuild the entire position group outside of like 1 or 2 names at the start of the regular season. And they were lucky. They were very fortunate that they actually found a good mix. Eventually they had, Trey Brown and DJ Reed for a few games there. And then eventually, Sydney played a lot better when he stepped back into the starting lineup. But it's like, can you do that again if everything fails in preseason again? Like, are you going to be able to rebuild that group once more? It's just, that's a lot.
Yeah,
there's a lot of uncertainty there. I feel like if you have an opportunity, and this is a good segue for us to kind of start talking about these guys, if you have an opportunity to get someone like a Sauce Gardner or a Derek Stingley, like I think you really, really, really need to consider it. I know there's even bigger pressing needs on the roster, quarterback, edge rusher, etc. But cornerback, I mean, like if they could get a really like a guy that has an all-pro type of ceiling, that's you got to at least think about it. And like someone like Sauce specifically is such a good fit for them stylistically, I feel.
So Matty, I know I've said the word before like 1,000 times already. Quickly, Matty, do you have a quick ranking? Do you have a top 5? Because I think we all know, everyone listening, that Stingley and Gardner are comprised of top 2. But to give a preview,
I get way too specific. I get way too precise with trying to think what fits Seattle when it comes to rankings. Rather,
that you can't
like,
think globally.
Also, I haven't watched enough of people, but I mean, I guess. Well, let's start with the fact I prefer Sauce for the Seahawks over Stingley, because you don't get people coming out of college who have 33.5-inch arms, a 6'3", ran a 4.4 140. But most importantly, they actually press people. So when I say press people, he's up at the line of scrimmage playing 2-to-1 to none with the arms. He's putting his arms to use. And, against Alabama, for instance, and just for everyone, that's step kick technique, right? Mm-hmm. That's what the Seahawks want. He didn't use an outside read step. Seattle would add that in. Essentially, don't want to give up the fade ball, the go ball. So to wait out the dancing, but also given you're lining up on his inside eye to protect against the fade, you just take a little, like not even 6-inch lateral step with your outside foot just to protect against the fade, because that's the one thing you don't want to give up, right? He didn't do that, but I mean, he was locking everyone up. Now, level of competition, slight concern. 2021, he added a few more techniques, a bit of an inch, a bit of like a soft shoe as well. Not using his arms as much. Kind of, if you think about the kind of techniques Jalen Ramsey uses, trying to do stuff a bit like that. Personally, still prefer him just pitching his tent, hanging in there, playing 2-to-1 to none with the arms. Because it's not just that he has long arms, right? He like knows how to use them. And you go to Alabama, right, which is where I was getting with all that spiel. The level of competition against Alabama, he's like against Alabama's receivers, right? He's able to play. He reverted back to like his kind of step kick style, and he is beautiful in phase with wide inside releases, which is like the hardest thing to cover, from like a cut split as well against their kind of receivers, right? Yeah. So for Seattle, you could just stick him left cornerback. Now, the Trey Brown thing, that's interesting, right? Because Sydney's going to be on the left side, and it's actually the right side. Sauce has that experience to play right and left. He actually did do both in Cincinnati. He just, to me, and he's very competitive. He has recovery speed, recovery length to brush up on. Like, I'd add that outside read step. He could do with, like, occasionally he's kind of so locked on with his arms that his feet, he could move. He could take an extra step to stay square and take more air out of releases rather than then turning and running after that. But really, he's able to flip his hips with his arms on. And it honestly, like, I don't like comps, but I mean, Richard Sherman said it himself. Richard Sherman was like, "Hey, you remind me a lot of myself coming out of college." On Richard Sherman's podcast. But obviously you're way ahead of me. Like, I wish I'd been as polished as you are coming out. So it's not just me who thinks this. Like,
Matty, Matty, didn't you tweet that he played man 75% of the time in college?
I don't think
Something
so.
like
but
crazy
also,
like that.
if that has been tweeted out, I don't trust that because this is what I tweeted out. So he played, according to Sports Info Solutions, he had a 75% press percentage, which led all the draft prospects, and 1.9 total points per game in press, which came out second despite his high volume.
So, Matty, how do you like him at the top of routes, like in breaking routes? Like, I know you mentioned those wide inside releases, but when that route breaks, how sticky is he?
In off or in?
Either.
Oh, sorry.
Really.
Off or okay. So his issues. Thank you. His issue is he is very grabby. And it's. I mean, you kind of, if you're gonna stick, he's not the most agile, right? And that's why I don't think he's necessarily the guy you put as like a shadow the one, right? Now we can get into is that worth? To me, that's still way worth where he's gonna go, right? Because you can just stick him on a side and anchor that side down. I mean, look what Sherman did, right? Again.
Yeah.
But he is overly grabby. Now, to stick with stuff, like he's not going to be like, he's not going to run. I don't know if he did run a 3-cone, but he's not the most agile. He's agile enough, but he is, if you're not the most agile, you do have to grab a bit, stay in phase, like be realistic here. Receivers, they one arm push off and stuff. Now it's just about not grabbing cloth. It's about like being smart about how you grab. Like Sherman was pretty damn good at grabbing the arm to stay in phase. So you're right to bring that up because he isn't the most sticky, but then like he has really fluid hips, right? Like he has fluid hips. So in off coverage when he's asked to like play with his butt to the sideline, and then say flip your hips with like an out route. So you're opening 45 degrees. Well, it's like 75 degrees to the out route. It's impressive again. So I don't know. Did that answer that?
No, that's so then
he is overly grabby. Like but you much prefer that, right? You much prefer. I always say this, but you much prefer someone to play with physicality, and this is rare physicality, right? Mm-hmm. Like against anyone. He doesn't suddenly see Alabama guys and then go, oh, I'm gonna play off, or oh, I can't. He knows what he is. Like he jams the heck out of receivers. And he doesn't overstep with releases. He has that patience as well.
Okay.
I'd rather someone was on the high end of aggression than you can tune it down. It's very hard to tune up aggression, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. He just has that. So then how do you feel about Stingley in comparison?
So Stingley,
and considering fit and all that.
So Stingley, first thing is arms are under 31 inches. They were 13.58 for an inch, and he's only 6 foot. Which I mean, heck, I'm 5'10" on a good day, so I'm hardly the tallest. But let's relax.
So you're allowed to say it, is what you're saying. You're allowed to call guys short.
Yeah, because being short is a great thing. But in terms of Seahawks profile, like short Pete Carroll ain't picking me to play corner. So, So Stingley, incredible mover, which really shines, especially in off coverage. He's just he's just a bit scary to me. Like, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes.
My computer's frozen, but that's fine. He's a bit scary to me because his best take comes, in his freshman year. Well, that's not true. Actually, that's not true. but like his largest body of work and most production on the ball comes in his freshman year. The next year, Bo Pelini comes in. Their defense is impacted by COVID, and they're just busting coverages left, right, and center. He's still showing some good stuff, right? And then he hurts his Lisfranc, which is a nasty little injury, and he only plays 4 games, but he's hurt in those games. However, in 2021, like UCLA, his technique was the most polished that I saw it. And he is just an incredible moving, really good at playing the football. He just seems like, I don't know. To me, he seems raw, especially in press. Both Alabama games as a freshman, but also the next year in 2020, he was cooked by Devonta Smith, which brings to me like his press technique is very much like inching off and not really using his hands. It's all feet, right? So think of the Witherspoon example. They don't want people to do that. So that's one thing, right? Devonta Smith, he's overstepping a bit. His patience isn't quite there. He's so reliant on his feet. To me, he just has quite a lot to learn in those aspects of press. Heck, though, like he looks to me really like he's more like Jalen Ramsey, right? He's not that level of player, but in terms of his role, like he could move. Like he's just learned in a kind of trial by fire kind of way. I don't know. What do you?
No, I mean, that's a characterization I would agree with. So then the question becomes, even if you have Stingley over Gardner, just in pure like cover skills, does the fit with Gardner Gardner isn't, the gap between them isn't big enough to where you'd be dissuaded from leaning toward fit, right? To take one guy over the other. So I think you can fashion an argument for Gardner over Stingley in that regard at 9. For Seattle's purposes, probably.
No, definitely. And I think actually the league is going to do the same. I mean, we'll see, but I think they'll take Sauce over Stingley too. And I don't know. His ceiling is ridiculously high, right? But then Sauce's ceiling is really high as well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean, I could be overthinking it. Like, Like, can he pure cover and move? Like, ultimately, what do you want from a corner? Someone who can move, right? You have to be able to run and move, and he can do that. It's just quite a lot of stuff to brush up. So he's a big one where, interviews, all that stuff that we can't do.
Coaching staff get a feel for, because like you said, they straight up traded Akella Witherspoon when, like, people even said he wasn't necessarily playing poorly. He just wasn't playing how they wanted to play, and they were willing to move on from him over that.
Yep.
So, and they even did that knowing that Trey Brown was nicked up, and it would be a while before they saw him. So that kind of speaks to how important that is to them. Now, granted, they've got different coaches coaching them, and maybe Pete is part of what seemingly Pete was able to sell to Scion was like a level of like, well, we're going to do X, Y, and Z to like sell you on this job. So maybe that means a level of latitude given to Carl Scott and deciding that, because we know Carl Scott has a very rich background coaching technique and scheme as well. So I don't know. I don't know how much to weigh.
So the other thing is, right,
those coaching changes.
The other thing, like last year, Pat Surtain, right, who was like crazy polished in a variety of techniques, showed real good press, 6'2", 202 pounds, 32.5-inch arms. He went 9 overall to Denver. And if I were to compare him with Stingley, especially for Seattle, right? And yes, we have the hindsight of Surtain being a great success in his rookie year in Denver, right? Trying to remove that from the equation, but obviously it's inevitable. But I still, I'd have Surtain grade him higher than Stingley. So, but then maybe 9 is where Stingley goes. It just seems like such an incomplete, scary kind of profile to me. But
it really, like, the not, because you want to see progression in the guy's junior year.
Because I really feel like 2021, if he hadn't got hurt, we'd have seen all the stuff I'm talking about. I'd still probably have the question mark over his not using his arms in press. But
Sure.
Maybe they
Yeah.
regard him as a smaller mold, and they're kind of good with that. Anyway.
Yeah. All right. So the next guy that comes to mind for me would be Elam. But who do you have? Have you've watched Elam, right?
Yeah. So let's just get this.
So what do you think of him,
order.
and where would you take him in a perfect world? And then do you think he could be there at 40?
So he's an odd one because I when I was watching him, I didn't necessarily think he had the like top end speed, like so his recovery speed I didn't think was there, right? I sometimes I thought that doesn't look fast, and then he goes and runs the 4.3740. So maybe I don't know what I'm looking at. What they'll like about him is his, in my opinion, his technique got a lot better from throughout the years, right? 2021 most polished technique. I mean, teams don't call. There's different ways to coach very similar techniques, right? He had elements which were like a step kick, right? And he played 2 to 1 to none, and he stood in there, right? He jammed. He looked to jam people, disrupt them, and was patient, very patient player. So, and he added that kind of 2 to 1 to none vibe in 2021. So there's patience. Yeah, I mean,
He had
I'd
he had a
like
good
it.
game against Alabama too.
He did.
So
But then that was tough as well because it's like anyway, yeah.
I mean, it's still Alabama. So do you think he could be there at 40, or do you think he's a surefire first rounder?
I think he's like that kind of back of the end of the first round guy, right? And
Yeah.
so the other guy who is probably going to go back of the first, like Elam, just didn't get me that excited, and I guess it's because, and this is ridiculous to say, but it is how it is. His arm length, right? Like if this is a guy who's doing this and he has 32-inch and longer arms, he's like really long, then you're like, oh, that's nice. But he has 30 and 7/8 of an inch long arms. Oh, he ran a 4.3940, but who cares? So his arms are like, they're not really short, but they're shorter than you ideally like, right? So yeah, and then in off coverage, he kind of got caught out a bit, but that's, I don't know. I don't really.
So what about?
So
oh, sorry. You finish up, and then I have a guy that I want to ask you about.
Well, maybe it was Andrew Booth.
No. It's Emerson from Mississippi State.
Oh, he's later, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Andrew Booth is someone I got more excited about, which kind of contradicts what I'm saying. But he kind of reminded me a bit of that if they picked him, he'd remind me of the Trey Brown pick, because it's clearly done because he has just incredible movement skills and burst, right? I mean, Booth's a much better mover than Brown. He's 6 foot with 31.5-inch arms and is a junior coming out. He'll go end of the first, I think, as well, maybe even higher, because his just twitching off coverage. He's just so sticky. He's so agile. He's so bursty. He's got so much long speed. His ball skills are incredible. He can play top down on most routes because he's confident staying square and scooching. And then in press, he's just so raw. Like, so it's kind of like a moldable ball of clay. Like, their defense is kind of vibey. Like with Venables, they're like disguise and stuff. They're kind of all the corners are just doing their thing out there. So technique wise in press, I think you could kind of work on what you want with him, but his just ability to move and cover despite not having the press polished up, and even his off stuff, he's like taking weird steps and like I don't know if it's a false step, but it's kind of weird, and he's like changing his feet up, like, and yet still he's covering everything against high levels of competition. His tackling is kind of just run through guys low, so that needs work. But and that's what I should say about Sauce. His tackling wasn't very good. He's very much over pursue. He's getting downhill, which is really good, but he's over pursuing and then just using his length. He's not making any shoulder contact, which that's not ideal. But Booth's his issue is he just speeds downhill and they played a lot of off. So and aggressive, like kind of defense, which enables him to trigger fast. But he's really much just dive at the legs of someone. Not much, no wrap, not much going on. So that in the NFL, that will need work. Realistically, he's probably more fit for one of these like cover zero teams. But and Seattle probably thinks, okay, this is an incredible mover. And he would represent real value because he didn't do as many of the drills. But yeah, Seattle probably thinks we don't need to take this sort of guy here, this high. This I think this is how Seattle thinks. Like, why take someone who still requires coaching work? We can just coach someone up a bit later who has not quite as good a profile. But yeah, the other thing with Booth is real concept recognition as well, which I hadn't seen from other corners. That showed up quite obviously. Okay. So I like Booth, is what I'm saying, basically.
So have you watched the UW guys?
No, haven't watched them. Although I briefly watched the one who's more of a nickel.
McDuffie.
Yeah, he just looks like a nickel to me.
Yeah. I was just gonna say he seems for the perimeter. He seems really skilled. He's just outsized. He's outmatched.
Yep.
And my mind always goes to, they've already got Trey Brown. Do they need another similar concept where, because he's had Trey Brown had plays last year where he was an inch away from making a play on the ball, but it still wasn't, almost isn't enough, right? So in those contexts, I don't know if they want to do that. Kyler Gordon seems like a guy that is a little bit more within the range of, like he's still on the smaller side. Like he's not long. I think he's 5'11", but it's still within he's hitting the thresholds, I think, just to be a viable perimeter corner. He seems really smooth, off ball, like off the line of scrimmage. He can squeeze routes pretty well. But then I wonder what your thought is with him in press. He seems like, I don't know if false stepping is the right word, but it seems like he's getting caught, but then his recovery seems good. And then he has another play where it seems like he has all right press technique. So he just kind of seems a little all over the place, but I see cover skills. So I wonder if he would be a consideration at 40 or 41. I know that he's being talked about as a fringe first. I don't know if, again, for what you're talking about, if they think there are other guys in this draft that have traits, but they're undercoached, they're not coached the way they'd like them to be, probably just take them later. That's probably why they're looking at a guy like Kalen Barnes. He has all the athleticism you could ever want. At least because they had a visit with him, right? Yeah. So, but he seems like a third, fourth round guy. So does that put them out of the conversation for a guy like Gordon or McDuffie, et cetera, or Booth? So I don't know. Who else have you watched?
Well, McCreary is incredibly Seahawky in his press technique. He was the one guy at the Senior Bowl who I was impressed with. I was really disappointed with the corners at the Senior Bowl. It's hard because you're in a one-on-one world. You haven't got any real guidance on what technique to use, and people rarely think pure one-on-one. But he showed real patience, step kick style, 2-to-1 to number the arms. Now the arms are 28 and 7/8 of an inch long, so they're very short. So he'd be smaller corner. Maybe he gets taken higher than they'd like. You think about, I was looking up like Brandon Staley's defense where they've got Asante Samuel, who has really short arms as well. And maybe that, I don't know, the Staley tree, I think that's overplayed. But maybe because McCreary's done it against the best, right? Like when we get to receivers, Dotson for Penn State, McCreary had a great game against him. He just doesn't have that long arms, but he still uses them and he's still staying on top of guys. It's just when he has a soft shoe approach as a change up, which maybe he'd use against the bigger dudes. It's just like, as we'll probably see with Trey Brown, like I'm expecting it to happen. When you get to a catch point and you don't have as long arms, that you will get, eventually it will happen where you get found out, you can't contest it. I actually thought when Trey Brown hurt his knee, that's what had happened initially, that he just wasn't tall and long enough, but he'd hurt his knee. So Yeah, I mean, I like McCreary, but probably too high given the profile. One of those sort of players, but very Seahawky in the sense that he's taking air out of releases, staying on top when he presses. A lot of the guys, they look to play for the low hip, which is what they've been coached. But McCreary's actually good at staying on top of people and taking air out, and trying to use his arms a bit more.
Okay. So, have you seen Kalen Barnes, Taylor Britt, the guys that Seattle's connected to?
So let's get them. So they've all had top 30 visits with Seattle as a source, right? So Barnes is probably has the best metrics, like advanced metrics for a corner outside of source, right? He has 39% press percentage, so he did it fairly often, 7th most in the draft class. 0.7 total points per game in press, which is tied for the 14th best. He's 5'11.5 inches with 31 3/4 inch arms. But more importantly, he can move with a 4.23 seconds 40. Now, Baylor, they play a few techniques which are kind of Seahawky. Like they look to stay patient out there. They have this like 45 and out like slides, like to cut releases off, which is what Seattle does in step kick after the initial transition. He can run and he's sticky. He just doesn't use his arms as much as maybe you'd like, as he's been coached, but as you'd like to see from prospect. And the fact that he ran such a fast 40 means he's probably mid-rounder. But probably he's going to go like a round earlier than he would have done. So, I mean, that's an option. I wouldn't hate it. He's competitive. He tackles. He can hit for his size. So, Taylor Britt, I only seen one game. That was Oklahoma. He's more of an inch soft shoe guy. He had a 22% press percentage, which was tied for the 19th most. 0.8 total points per game in press, which is tied 11th. He ran a 4.3. He's chippy. I admired his ability to talk smack, even though he's getting like knocked on his ass. He is that kind of mirror step dude, but he does look to get two arms on and jam people with his 31.5 inch long arms. His press bail stuff impressed me. He's just doing what he's told, but his ability to overlap to the number 2 is there. Like the movement skills are obvious in that, and he's showing that basic awareness, but it's still showing it, which is nice. He might be I guess he's like a day 3 guy, but but then I'm seeing now he's boosted up a bit, so maybe he's day 2. I don't know. I wouldn't hate it. I guess needs a lot of work in press.
He seems like a guy maybe at 72.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing now. So,
okay.
Alontae Taylor from Tennessee. He was one of these guys with over 32-inch arms, 20% press percentage, which is 22nd most, 1 total points per game in press, which is like, saw him against Pittsburgh and Alabama, noticeably quick and twitchy. So he's like that twitchy guy. He's more of a soft shoe mirror kind of guy as well, though. He didn't really get his arms on people, so yeah. The guy late on, who I really think is sort of Seahawky, is a Caleb Evans out of Mizzou. Now, he was disappointing at the Senior Bowl. I didn't really like what he showed. But his profile of 32-inch arms, hold on, let me Google him. But essentially, what he does is on tape. I watched him against Arkansas and Berks, which is a kind of the perfect matchup for him because he's a big guy, so he wants to go up against big guy. He might get in trouble a bit more against speed, but he ran a 4.46 40-yard dash, and he plays 2 to 1 to none. He's quite wide with his feet, like they probably would want to clean that up a bit, but he's jamming guys, and you putting that length to use, hanging in there, and then staying over the top of that like that. So if you're listening to audio, I was mimicking, but you should just look at pictures of Pete Carroll doing it when he holds his 2 arms out and then on his heels of his feet. So yeah, Evans, and the other thing with Evans, they played him in quite a bit of cover 2, cover 2, anyone can really do that, especially in college. But from cover 2, he hits people. He was flying up. I think he had hold on, I tweeted out some of his more advanced stats. Oh, here we go. No, but Caleb Evans was the best metrics for Longhorn Outsider source, not Barnes, because 2.3 total points per game in total press points per game, which is tied for the 10th best. 2 total points per game on the outside, aligned outside, so that's tied for the 8th. 24% press percentage, which is tied for the 17th most, and a 3% broken and missed tackle percentage, which is tied for first. And Seattle, when they were looking at these big corners, especially later on, think about like Trey Flowers, they always mentioned guys who could hit and come down and hit and actually were played physical in the run game. So he's an option. So I guess there's a lot of these guys I feel are quite raw in the one area, like some of the important areas that Seattle would like them to be a bit more polished in. So in that sense, we may get the kind of inevitable day 3 dude. Now, that is with the caveat that I'm not an NFL scouting department, and so I need to get more Nebraska defense film for Taylor Britt. And, if McCreary's there round 3, I wouldn't hate it. An interesting one as well is Marcus Jones, he'd be a small, like he's 5'8", but he actually lined up a bit more. They kind of moved him around. They played him at safety a bit in Houston. They also played him a bit on the outside, but he's mainly a nickel. But he's that kind of matchup. He's not DJ Reed, but he'd be kind of like that in Seattle. So, and he's twitchy, and his production on the football is nuts. Like he got his in the slot in college, especially. Like you are likely to see a bit more sort of action, like fitting the run in their defense is the way they do it as well. But and being at the point of attack, but he got his hands on the football a lot. So, and he'd bring return game ability. So there's a lot of names, and I don't hate any of them, but I also am not sure about them ultra high. I don't know. I waffled a lot. Any thoughts?
It's as far as draft strategy goes, I think the only thing that we can, even though they've never taken one before the 3rd round, the only thing that we can predict that would make sense that we could really see them doing is like if Gardner's there at 9, I think they wouldn't hesitate unless they have a trade down package they just really like. I don't think they're going to rule out Gardner at 9 just because of, like they don't typically value it. I think they would consider it. Outside of that, I don't know, man. I don't think they're going to be going into this draft thinking, well, what's the next best corner? Well, we'll just take that guy. I think they're going to go, okay, we're going to be developmental like they've always been, like you've alluded to. So, probably day 2, day 3 is where they're really looking.
There seems to be a lot of value there as well. Like, I wouldn't mind like kind of double dipping into that. Like, there's a lot of guys I haven't really mentioned, like Tariq Woolen. He'll go higher than not higher than he should, but he'll go probably higher than his tape would suggest because of his testing being so incredible. But he's another long option. And him going higher means he'll push people down, right? So that's a thing. Then like MJ Emerson, 33.5-inch long arms. Jalen Watson, probably a day 3 guy out of Washington State, 32.25-inch. Vincent Gray from Duke, bad testing, but 32 3/8-inch long arms. Sam Webb out of that's a wild school, but he had 32 1/8-inch long arms. So there's like real options to get like guys who ran pretty well in the main and along. Plus the small guys who maybe you don't love in round 2, but they fall. Like draft someone who can cover at the end of the day. Like McCreary can cover. So
yeah. All right, considerations there. So the other position group that we are looking at this draft. Unless Matty, did you have any last thoughts on corner? Ty?
I'm good. I think we covered everything.
We abstained. We that was pretty thorough exploration there. So receivers. How are we feeling about
Matty, what are you clicking?
I'm playing with the app.
So obviously, right now, Seattle has DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They just drafted Dwayne Eskridge. They've acquired Noah Fant. For 2022, they've got plenty of firepower at the positions that catch the ball. But DK Metcalf presently, there's some. It's not ruled out that they could trade him. I don't think they will. I think they extend him. They might even franchise him. But that's a possibility. So that's not a sure thing. Tyler Lockett is 29, and he's had recent injuries that he's been able to play through. And he actually came out really clean last year for the first time in about 3 years, as far as like not sustaining a midseason injury that he was able to play through. So, but just those factors are still there. But then they did draft Dwayne Eskridge, which he kind of had a false start. Well, rookie
and
year.
Don't forget, they have, obviously Eskridge, you'd expect him to have a bigger role given the what do you call it? The spend, I don't know, still spend, but also Frederick Swain is probably ahead of him. Going into camp, they will let them compete their butts off. But like Freddie Swain's the other dude, right? So the weird thing with what you just said, right, is I was like, well, and you've watched a lot more of these guys than me, but I was like, oh, you got DK, so I won't watch these big guys because you can't really. You can, but I'd rather, especially in the offense and the routes that Walden might run, especially when they draft Desmond Ridder. They might run deep crossing routes, right? Like you're more thinking Robert Woods than you are thinking, let's get another big X type.
Right. And there are guys this draft. Yeah, me too. There are guys this draft that mirror DK. There's plenty of them that like just jump out. Now they're not all 1-for-1 comps, but there's plenty of overlap.
That
London,
type of role.
Right. Like Drake London, Burks, Alec Pierce, George Pickens. There's lots of guys this draft that do very similar DK things. But so Tyler Lockett, he can run a lot more routes than he's shown because of the usage given like trying to fit the quarterback and the quarterback fitting the receiver. I think with a differently styled quarterback, provided that quarterback is also good, which is half the battle, that we might see more of Lockett's route running open up a little bit more of his route tree open up. Again, results might be worse, which they probably will be. You're probably not going to find a quarterback as good as Wilson, at least this year. But so point being is that Lockett has a little bit more to him, but it would be nice to get that route if they're going to get a receiver. And they'll probably start looking around day two. I think there could be some considerations. It'd be cool to get a guy that is known for just like, hey, this guy can run a full route tree and he has hands, right? So just to complement Lockett and DK. DK dominates down the sideline. Lockett can run, the deep post, the deep over, etc.
To package what you've said, right? Like in a slightly different way, you basically Doug Baldwin is what we're looking for.
It'd be nice if there's a 6-foot Doug Baldwin in this class.
Oh, right. Okay. So we're getting picky with it. Right.
That
would be nice because we've got, assuming they don't do something crazy like trade Metcalf, which, let's not get into that. But you got the X, you got the kind of flanker Z, or as you guys say, Z, in Lockett, right? And he can be a bit of a slot. You've got Eskridge, who's kind of a Lockett mirror, right? But more probably going to get fly sweeps, and I think they thought they could do that a bit more with him, and then he got concussed on it after late hit out of bounds. You could definitely see them taking maybe another fly sweep kind of threat, but really, if you're taking the pure slot guy, well then, because Eskridge has outside ability, right? But if you're taking more of a pure slot guy, he should be able to do fly sweeps anyway. So what we're saying is most likely, if we're trying to predict what the Seahawks are doing, which heck, that's difficult, right? And they might just go and take another X or just the best athlete or the best player available, right? But most likely, it's going to be a slot, right? A slotty 6-foot guy.
I think that the best guy that could be there at 40 or 41 that is still good enough to really like, you got to take this guy, even controlling for need and the draft scenarios so many different things could unfold where you're like, all right, you might as well take a position that is not as much of a need here just because this guy's so good. You know what I'm saying? I think the considerations there, that is not the big X type. I think Jahan Dotson might be the best guy that could be there at 40, 41. And some really smart people have comped him to like Tyler Lockett, like Nate Tice, for example. But I think Jahan Dotson has a little bit more in his wheelhouse of just like pure route running and the intermediate, being able to dominate there, and he can be outside and inside. Now he is smaller, he's a little diminutive. He can catch away from his body,
178
though.
pounds.
Yeah. My favorite receiver in this draft, personal preference, is Chris Olave, and then Dotson is just like the fringe first, early second version of him.
Yeah, you've got type.
Yeah, well, I'm a reactionary guy. I'm always reacting to what Seattle doesn't have. I've realized in the draft, if I'm being honest with myself. So now I'm kind of contradicting myself because I did say, well, I think Tyler has more of that in him, and he does. But the Rams, for example, the offense they ran, they had Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, right?
Yeah.
So you've got Tyler Lockett.
Dotson, I mean, I hate comps, but I've been doing it quite a bit just to sort of, try and illustrate usage, right? Not because it's the same player, but he has like some Woods. He could do like the Woods role.
Yeah.
And his usage at Penn State was interesting, like the amount of kind of intermediate stuff I saw, and his ability to be sharp cuts, across on crosses, like nice stems, and it just
he can get off the line too. If guys try to press it, I mean, for his size, it's relative to his density, right?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the agility drills because he ran a 7.28 second 3-cone. Like the 3-cone must have changed, or they're just not training for it anymore because he didn't. He looked more agile than that. I mean, you're not running round 3 cones on the field, but I don't know, man.
Right. So the problem with this is that I've watched about 8 receivers, and
that's not a problem.
Well, but Seattle's probably going to be, if they take a receiver, it's probably going to be in that 7 to 12 receiver taken range.
Well, you say that, but it's the Seahawks, and
True.
They might surprise it. If at 9 there's what they view as a rare prospect there, and they don't want Jordan Davis.
That's true. I mean, so
9 makes it different. Like, is Olave gonna last till 9?
I think that's like right where he'll go. I think he'll go
to the Seahawks.
I think he'll go like 8 to 15.
I think we cracked it, folks.
Yeah. So here, just real quick. I think so. I'm a little dissuaded by his lack of combine, but I think Drake London's the best receiver in the draft, and I think he can be like a complete X, like do everything. Like not. So
he's not. I saw someone trying to comp him to Michael Thomas and saying he's a slant boy.
I don't know about that. I think Michael Thomas. I think he's very different from Michael Thomas. I mean, maybe I just don't know what I'm looking at.
Comps suck. I agree.
So
what about Garrett Wilson?
So so this is kind of how I stack them. I go London, Jameson Williams, just because the game breaking, takes the top off the defense stuff, Alabama, SEC, all that stuff. I go London, Jameson Williams, then I go Olave, and then I think I go probably Garrett Wilson. Just because, there aren't as many concerns there. The next guy I go with is Justin Ross. I think Ross, as the saying goes, if he could stay healthy, I think he would have been challenging for the number 1 receiver in this class. Like, I think he has the talent there.
Yeah.
So
he's
another
have you
big
seen
guy
his
that can
testing?
do everything.
It's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels, but he's hurt, like right now even.
Yeah. He dominated like the best defenses when healthy.
He can beat press, and he can run square ends at his height and weight. So he
could be like
he can pluck the ball out of the air.
But he's like a kind of risky wild card kind of pick, right? Because of his medical background, like
he might fall. Then after him, I go Dotson. So and then you're getting into the
I think he definitely will fall. By the way, yeah.
Yeah. Now that said, Traylon Burks will go in front of Dotson. I just like Dotson more, but Burks absolutely will. I don't think Burks, like you have DK Metcalf, you don't need Burks. Now Burks, all these guys that are similar to DK, London obviously, but Ross, Pickens, Pierce, Burks, they all have better hands than DK. They're better at boxing
Even
out.
Pierce?
I think so. I think Pierce is really good in the air.
Yeah.
And I think that's why if any team drafts Desmond Ridder, you approach your receiver rostering strategy from two angles, and you do this for every quarterback. But reinforce the strength, so get the route runner that he can trust and get the ball to a landmark, which Ritter's really good at, and just having the timing of it. So reinforce that strength. That's Olave, that's Dotson, that's also Ross and London. But then hedge for the weakness, and that's where these big body guys on the perimeter, because you still need to throw the fade ball to be a good offense in the NFL. Ridder will throw the fade, no hesitation, but he's a little inaccurate with it, or rather inconsistent. So get him a guy that can give you margin for error. That's what Alec Pierce did for him at Cincinnati.
Well,
that's what Burks would do for him.
Out of the big guys, Pierce did test the best. Like, he had a 4.4 140 at 6'3", 211 pounds with a 40.5-inch vertical jump, 129-inch broad jump. Like, what the hell? That's absolutely
And Pierce probably has a little bit more to him as a complete route runner. It's just Cincinnati didn't need to use him that way.
Yeah, elements, yeah.
Right. I don't think Seattle's looking at those guys unless they really like London. Just because London and Ross, their versatility makes them not redundant with DK. So whereas Pierce, Burks.
So London's he can run a full route tree, in your opinion?
Yeah, and so people are saying, well, he's just a contested catch guy, but their quarterback situation at USC was so bad. He was being thrown unopen. He was being thrown to being covered when he was getting over.
Right, and still able to adjust to the ball and box out and go up and get it vertically with being thrown unopen.
The ball skills are ridiculous.
Okay, so NFL quarterback,
he's gonna have lots of fun with it.
Interesting.
In a perfect world, well, for them, he goes to Green Bay, but he won't fall that far.
Griff, have you watched any of the three receivers that the Seahawks had a visit with? That's Tare. I'm sure you didn't watch Derek.
No, that's the irony. I haven't watched any of them.
What about Christian Watson?
I haven't even watched Watson.
So Watson's the Baylor. I always get them confused because they're green and yellow. The North Dakota State.
Yeah, North Dakota State. Yep.
Okay. I know he tested nuts, and that is kind of like the, say Pierce is going, round 2, like Watson's them trying to. I mean, he's like he's like a power X, right? I don't even know what that means, but like he could carry the football.
Yeah,
and he has that on his tape, right? Like he's big and huge and tested crazy, so he'd be like. I mean, I don't know if he'll last this long. I should watch him. But he's sort of that late round 2, maybe like DK again, right? But small school at the Senior Bowl, he I watched him there. He was okay. Like there was some element of release plans, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So he'll probably. I mean, he's within the range of where they likely take a receiver, unless like. What if they surprise us and they're just obsessed with Jameson, Williams, and they take him at?
What did you think of him?
Well, I think he's incredible. I mean, he's everything people say he is. He's hard to cover. He just is so freaking fast.
And deep he will fall slightly because he hurt his knee.
That's true.
Boys ACL.
But that said, though, Seattle has plots of post threats between Lockett and Eskridge. I mean, even if
this conversation, though, like what you said is right? But then it just sums up that they're good at receiver. Like
they pretty good at receiver. It's just looking to the future, and technically,
you need another.
It'd be nice if you had a 6-footer that could run routes instead of.
So who is that? Who is that?
Yeah, well, Olave is exactly 6 foot.
That's you should. Oh, is it?
Yeah, he's 6 foot. Doesn't have super long arms, but he has hands though.
Okay, so how about 6'1" Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama, Griffin?
That's
Hmm.
I also have not watched him.
Well,
Have
I
you?
have.
Okay, good.
I have. Not anticipating. You told me you hadn't watched some of the guys, so I watched Jalen Tolbert against. It was like a better defense because he plays with South Alabama. I can't remember what defense it was. Anyway, he is good. He's really sudden. He works leverage. You'll like him. He's real big on dropping his weight at the line of scrimmage. Not in like a lateral sense. It's still quite downhill, but he has like some release plan. He can improve his consistency though with press releases. I mean, who can't really realistically coming out of college? And he could vary his pacing of it a bit more. It's kind of like one speed releases really, and then take off. That he could vary that up a bit.
Yeah.
But he works back to the football well, adjusted the ball mid-air really well, hand fights well downfield. Love how he tempos his routes downfield, tries to alter, his tempo to sell vertical routes when the concept allowed for it. There's a lack of power in his upper body when run blocking and probably his lower body, but he's willing and adjusts his leverage well, good aiming points, and he can burn. He ran a 4.49 40, but he's like a vertical threat. He's that kind of intermediate to deep dude. You'd like him. You should watch him.
All right. I'll put him on the list.
What about these?
Told.
What about these like littler, speedier dudes that if they kind of go more with the Eskridge mold? Like, have you watched Calvin Austin?
I've not watched Austin. I started watching Sky Moore a little bit. Have you seen Austin?
Sky Moore, I literally didn't watch because I was like, there's no shot they're taking another Western Michigan guy. But I do remember he popped when watching Eskridge. I was like, oh, that's a nice that's not Eskridge. Who's this guy? Oh, he's dope as well. But I watched Austin at the Senior Bowl, and not that I was there, but I managed to acquire the practice footage. And Austin is tiny. And I don't
Very
think
tiny.
And I mean, I'd like it, but realistically, when you're that small, there's only a certain there's a reason why there's not that many that guys that small. The success rate is a lot lower. So mid-round pick, but I mean, a good example of this is Andy Isabella, who had a great Senior Bowl in many people's eyes, and then So
for context, Austin
how'd
is
you get on the
5.
field?
Yeah. Austin is 5'7", 170.
So essentially, you just have to be an incredible route runner in the two-way go of the slot. And so your usage is down. You're a role player, and so you could argue, despite his incredible production, you can argue that kind of player is more someone you kind of take day 3, or even undrafted. You could find that in undrafted free agency, perhaps.
Well,
which is harsh. And Austin will go higher than that, but that's anyway.
The issue though is the good thing is he uses his body well. He's good with contact, but like you were saying, the routes got to be nice, and the routes still need quite a bit of work.
And it's good. He's good with contact, but he's still
and once he's starting to get hit by actual NFL dudes, that's pretty worrisome. So
So the other guy I briefly watched, Griff, was Doobs, which is an excellent name.
Doobs.
Romeo.
It's
what a name. So I draft him on name alone, but to me he's kind of oh god, I don't want to say that. I was gonna say he's like Debo light, but he's not. That's inaccurate. He's like a muscle slot.
He's
kind of
he can win on the outside too. He's almost 6'2". I think he's a 6'2" height weight speed guy in the sense that, I mean, what am I saying? I think he's a route runner.
No, that's why he's 201 pounds, but he just looks like, I think it's how his legs are quite long, or his butt is quite.
He's got a density to him though.
Yeah, it's a dense butt, I think.
He squats.
Yeah, he squats. Yeah, there we go. Nailed it.
Yeah.
Really long strider. He eats up ground. I was impressed.
Yeah. Yeah, and he can catch in traffic. He's not afraid going over the middle. I mean,
Yep.
his focus is really good in traffic and stuff. And he can play above the rim. He can catch away from his body. He can run in breaking routes. You can even reduce him, like you said. You can also put him in the slot and stuff. I just think he kind of is like the perfect midpoint of DK and Lockett, and just like a good
Yeah,
complement.
and the kind of high hipped, like long legged, whatever nature to him, he kind of lacks that. He lacks agility, which shows up in kind of fairly straight, linear, like route running, right? But also, I kind of thought he'd have a bit more yak kind of ability, like wiggle to make guys miss, but he doesn't really
Yeah,
have that. So, but then, yeah, you'd like it to be better. But then
it's
when you're
not.
talking the in between of Lockett and Metcalf, that is
Yeah,
kind of that works, right?
So he doesn't hit the routes when he's successful. It's not like pure agility that is winning him. I mean, I think he has enough polish to him, and he's trying to be polished. So like, I think that's something he's going to be working on. He's trying to win with polish to complement the traits that he does have. He's naturally fast too. I think he is probably the most upside of the day two guys. I think he's like a square third rounder. I think I might like him just for the versatility and his skill set over even Pickens.
I really
Maybe
liked how he
or
attacked
Pierce. Yeah.
deep layers of coverage. Like he closes space to create space well. I mean, that also requires to have, having the freedom to do that within the offensive design. But he did do that. So
Yeah.
good for him.
Lastly, Sky Moore. I don't think he fits Seattle. Like you said, like it's hard to evaluate just because of the offense he's in. I think he's okay getting off the line. I think really good corners will kind of not fall for his shimmy at the line of scrimmage too much. He's kind of a bully. He likes to separate vertically by just kind of bullying guys. He's strong. He's got power to him. So they've got Eskridge. They don't need to go that route. It's just, I don't think he fits them.
Yeah,
So,
they're obviously not the same player, but there's like too many similarities.
Yeah.
Aside from coming from the same school. And I don't want to have to go through trying to eval all this RPO stuff.
It's not a fun, because we still don't really know what Eskridge is in totality yet. He showed some flashes of route running. Like he actually had some routes where he was the backside dig, like the 4th read, which he was never going to get the ball as the 4th read last year.
Not last year.
Maybe with Desmond Ridder, who is not a Seahawk. We're putting the cart before the horse
for now.
Yeah, I don't know. So that's where I've got it. Dubs is my favorite guy, I think, in the whole draft value.
Oh, is it Dubs?
It is Dubs.
Yes, Dubs. Sorry.
Actually, I just called him. He's not my favorite guy. He's my 3rd favorite pick in the value-wise in the 3rd round. It's definitely Dubs. Because
but
think like double.
It's 100% Dubs. Yeah. No, I've heard it on their broadcast.
Romeo Dubes.
It's Dubs. Okay. Anyway. So I think we're wrapping up here pretty quick. But before we do that, because I assume the next time we talk, it's going to be after the draft. So
well, real quick, we
might try to squeeze in a tackle discussion.
So tackle discussion and something on Monday, right? So that'll be out Tuesday. This is going out Friday. Then draft reaction to picks. That may be live. We'll see if we can work that out. But if not live, we'll have reaction to day 1, day 2, and day 3 from us all. So because we did that last year with year before last with the Jordan Brooks pick, and I think that was successful because first half we're like, what the hell, and then second half we're like, oh my gosh, we've watched the tape, it's amazing. So we'll do similar.
Yeah, we will get our takes off. We will react and in bad faith, of course.
Always.
Always. All right.
No.
Well, I was going to ask you guys to make a prediction as to who they take at number 9, but I guess we will save that for the next episode.
Oh no, we'll do it now, and then we'll what we'll do is we'll oh no, that doesn't work. We can't cut it and then do another prediction. No, that doesn't.
No.
You can't change time. Jordan Davis.
Jordan Davis. All right.
Yep.
Griff.
You know what? Charles Cross.
I think they'll trade down. It was interesting today. Schneider mentioned about tackles who are in offenses where they're asked to be slightly lighter to because they pass a lot. I was like, that's such a weird. Who could that possibly?
Right.
He's obviously talking about Stone Forsythe here. He's not talking about Charles Cross. No.
Yeah. Which that's there's a big discussion to be had there, and a lot would depend on who the quarterback is, because that may, and we'll talk about it when we talk tackles. But here, a little teaser for you guys: when we talk tackles, how much that matters depends on who the quarterback is, because it means the operative question there is, are they gun running? And if they are gun running, it signals a certain quarterback. If they're not gun running, it signals a certain quarterback.
There you go. I think they're going to trade down at the end of the day, but
that's not.
Those are not the rules.
I'd have said that.
Yeah, those are not the rules.
What are you doing? Don't do that.
I'm not. I was just acknowledging it.
I'll relax. Too much coffee.
I'm gonna go Sauce. I think they break trend. I think they do it. I think they go corner in the first round.
I would, as a DB guy, I would love it. That would be very exciting.
Yeah. And I'm very high on him. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's a good balance of fit and upside. It just works. It works so much.
Agreed.
There you have it.
All right.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please follow everyone at Matty F. Brown, at Dane, GNZLZ, at C Mike's Spin Move. And retweet it on Twitter, please, at Seattle Overload. And we appreciate you all. We'll be back Tuesday. Hopefully.
All right. Peace out.